Sarah, are you freezing in Wyoming?
I mean, I'm nice and warm inside, but outside it is a little chilly. I think we got down to -17 last night.
Oh my God. That's not a number.
Yeah.
That's like Antarctica.
Yeah, that's terrible.
I don't know, somehow it's not bad, but maybe that's because I'm only outside for like 1 minute at a time, walking from the house to the car and then from the car to the gym or the store or whatever. But are we waiting another minute or two to see if anyone else joins live, or are these normally just very few attendees and then people watch it later on YouTube or whatever?
I would say it's a mix. So, but definitely a lot of people do watch it later.
All right. Yeah, I'm good to start whenever. If we want to wait another minute or two, totally fine with me. Just let me know.
Becky, should we check some people?
Yeah, and I did put a reminder out in the group and I sent a reminder out. So hopefully some people, we had like, I think 10 or 11 people sign up. So I'm gonna, I'll message some people quick too.
Have you seen that PBS system that we're talking about? I looked it up this morning.
Just messaging a couple people.
I go back to like that. My numbers.
I'm gonna say we could probably start soon. I've messaged a few people, so
All right. Yeah, if they join a couple minutes in, that is fine with me. Okay, let me get this pulled up here. All right, are you able to see my screen there?
yes.
Looks good.
All right, great. Then, yeah, we will go ahead and get started. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Dr. Sarah Poliquin. I am a postdoc at Combined Brain. I've been with Combined Brain since 2021. And one of the things that I help oversee is Matrix, which is our natural history platform that is available to all members of Combined Brain. So today I am going to give a brief overview of Combined Brain for those of you who may not be familiar with us, and then I'm going to describe what a natural history study is, why it's important, and how you as the individual can help. And then I will also spend a lot of time talking about the capabilities of Matrix and what you can get out of this and how it helps the broader USP7 community. So Combined Brain is the Consortium for Outcome Measures and Biomarkers for Neurodevelopmental Disorders. It was started by Terry Jo Bichelle, who has an adult son with Angelman syndrome, and she wanted to see the rare genetic neurodevelopmental disorder world succeed and have more successful treatments, faster treatments for patients. And so she created Combined Brain in 2019. And we grew from an initial 20 members to having over 110 different patient advocacy groups who are part of Combined Brain. And we also work with clinicians, researchers, and pharmaceutical groups to all work together to find treatments for these disorders. The purpose of Combined Brain is, as I said, to speed up that path to finding and creating treatments for people who have severe genetic neurodevelopmental disorders, and often epilepsy or autism are comorbid with a lot of those disorders. And one of our big goals is to create and work with patient groups for natural history studies to develop better outcome measures. So as I said, we have well over 100 different members. And while these different disorders do have a lot of things in common, each is actually unique. So intellectual disability and developmental delay are necessary features of the disorders to be part of Combined Brain. And there's also typically epilepsy and autism. Other features are common, things like muscle tone issues, but every disorder is different. There's all something unique about each of your disorders. You know, USP7, you might be similar to other disorders like Prader-Willi or Hao-Fountain Syndrome, but there's always something that makes your disorder special. And so then we need the data to understand what it is that makes Hao-Fountain a distinct disorder and how we can best measure the progression of symptoms and figure out also what symptoms are most important to you, because what's most important to you could be very different than what is important to people with some of these other disorders that might on the surface look similar. So we really need that.
You have an office in Denver, right?
Yes.
You guys fundraise every year for my son, Maxwell.
Amber, can you mute yourself?
SLC 681.
Novus Biologics.
Yes.
Amber. Okay.
I'll text her.
All right. So then getting into kind of how the drug development process has looked before, the traditional way has had some pitfalls. This has often been centered on what is easy to study in the lab and in mice. So we start with what is studied in the mice, you figure out what outcome measures are needed, then what can be measured in clinical trials, and then you talk to the patients, and then clinical trials fail. And this is a huge disappointment to the community. It is a waste of millions of dollars and many years of effort, but there is hope. Things are changing. We are now starting to put patients at the center. And so this begins by asking what matters to you, the patients and the caregivers of patients. And then that helps determine what natural history needs to be collected. And then we can determine what can be measured and what endpoints to use, what outcome measures to measure those endpoints. And then clinical trials succeed because the whole time it has been based on what symptoms are seen in the patients and what symptoms are important to the patients. So I've mentioned natural history a couple times. What is a natural history study? It gathers information on how a disease affects a person over their entire lifetime. This can include seeing clinicians like in a clinical setting and getting measurements there. It can also include the responses to surveys from the caregivers. And it can be about symptoms, it can be about quality of life, it can include the samples, such as for the biorepository that you may given. All of this goes together into understanding what a disease like Hao-Fountain is to patients from birth all the way through their life. And so for a good natural history, you want to be able to link data from clinicians to the data from the patients. And so we use that. We use the CRID here. The CRID is the clinical research ID. Some of you already have that. Those of you who have participated in the biorepository, for example, will already have a CRID. And what this is an anonymous way to link data between different studies. And so this means that when we're sharing data, it's never your name and your address and all of that info. That's not what's being shared between these studies. It is purely going to be the responses to the surveys that you give, and like your particular genetic variant and those sorts of things. Always anonymous, always de-identified. So by filling out surveys in Matrix, which is the natural history platform, that data can then be linked with clinician data, such as from Christian Schaaf's study, and then that is that's linked together. So you'll often also hear about registries. So how is a natural history study different from a registry? A registry is a single point in time. It's a snapshot, while a natural history study is longitudinal. So a registry it includes simply a list of what patients are known, and also some of the like medical information on the patients. You can get some data from at that present moment. Like you might know if the child has seizures at this point, or you might know what motor skills they have achieved at that point in time. But a registry doesn't answer things like what motor skills will a person develop and what is the expected timeline for that. Or a registry will not be able to answer things like if a person develops seizures, are they likely to control those seizures and have, or other things about like learning to talk. All of these things require a longitudinal natural history where we take people and follow them over many years. And so the example here is perhaps as a toddler, somebody develops seizures, and then you see that they learn to crawl maybe around like 4 years old. The example here, CVI, is a vision impairment. But then here we're seeing that seizures are controlled in this person, perhaps in like adolescence age. And so that is data that you can get from following dozens of people for their entire lifetime. And then that enables researchers to understand what the disorder looks like, and also gives new families further information on what they can expect when they get that initial genetic diagnosis. And then, so what are some of the things that can come out of a natural history study? Like, what is the purpose? So as I've said, a big part of it is simply understanding the disorder, understanding all of the symptoms, for example, what treatments people use, which of those treatments are most effective at treating things such as seizures or movement disorders. You can record quality of life. It informs researchers about some of the more subtle nuances of a disorder. You can find things like genotype-phenotype correlation. So for example, you might find that people with gain-of-function mutations are more likely to have a given symptom, while those with loss-of-function mutations will have different symptoms. You can track treatment efficacy, and you have data to develop standards of care so that clinicians know the best way to treat people with USP7 mutations that come into their clinic. Natural history studies can also be used to create a timeline of the disorder, describing the typical development and identifying the optimal treatment window to prevent symptoms. So this is huge. What this means is that if you want a treatment that will prevent something like the onset of seizures, then you need to know when people develop seizures so that you can give the treatment beforehand, because it is sometimes easier to prevent the onset of symptoms rather than trying to stop it after it started. And so this makes clinical trials easier and more successful. You can also measure change with natural history studies and test new outcome measures. You can correlate it with biomarkers, which is, for example, something that we are really trying to use the biorepository for. And then another huge thing is natural history as a control group. So as some of you may know, trials or experiments, you need a control group. And for clinical trials, often this is a placebo. And so that means some of the people get the real treatment that is under investigation, and some people get a fake treatment. So this is like classically, it's like the sugar pill, or it could be just like a fake injection. But that it means that some people are not getting the treatment immediately, because we need to be able to show that the treatment is doing something. You need to be able to compare it to people who have not had the treatment. And for people with severe diseases, this is not the most ideal way to do it. It requires 50% of your people not receiving the treatment at first. So another potential way to do things is using natural history data as the control. So if you have enough data to confidently say that you know what the normal course of the disease is, then you can give everybody the treatment and compare them to that known course of the disease. And you might find that the people who receive the treatment have a much lower burden of symptoms compared to the natural history data. And this is not just hypothetical. This has been done with treatments before. So for example, with SMA, spinal muscular atrophy, the Zolgensma, the drug approved in 2019, was approved using natural history as the control. So for people with severe SMA, normally their muscles begin to fail, the person's not able to breathe, and then eventually these patients die. While those who received the treatment, they lived long past what had ever been reported in the natural history before. And so that was irrefutable proof that the treatment was helping these patients survive longer. And so you didn't need to have horribly unlucky patients receive a placebo control that wasn't actually doing anything for them yet. So the natural history can be incredibly important for this reason alone. So now that I've talked about what a natural history is and why it's important, next we can talk about how we collect natural history data. So at Combined Brain, we really like to emphasize patient-centered platforms. These allow the caregiver or the patient themselves, if appropriate, to directly fill out information on their disorder and their symptoms. We have surveys that are online that you as the caregiver can complete anytime, anywhere, in contrast to a natural history study that's being performed by a clinician, where you might need to fly halfway across the world in order to go see that researcher in the clinic. And then you can perhaps only see them once every year, every 2 years or something, while these online platforms enable you to just fill out data or fill out surveys whenever it is most convenient to you. And so we can get much more rich, complex, thorough data this way as well. Another thing that you can do with these online platforms is link your electronic health records. And so that'll pull in information like what medications your child may have used in the past. And so there are a number of different platforms that Combined Brain has looked at, and we have a number of criteria evaluating them. So one of the biggest is that it is free to the individual patient. So platforms like Matrix don't cost the patients anything. We can deploy validated surveys, which is important because that validated surveys are ones that are recognized in the scientific community as a whole and enable comparisons across diseases. And we know that these surveys can detect changes. So if your symptoms are getting worse or getting better, we know that these validated surveys are good at detecting those changes. Another requirement for the platforms is that the foundation, so here it would be the Hao-Fountain Syndrome Foundation and Combined Brain, have access to the data versus some other platforms where it's difficult for you as the patient advocacy group to be in control of the data. Use of the CRID to anonymously link data with other studies, And then also individualized data entry. So this is going to be you as the caregiver or patient determining what additional pieces of information you might want to record. So there are a couple platforms that Combined Brain likes, but Matrix is definitely one that we've endorsed a lot and many of our groups are using. So I've talked a lot about the surveys and questionnaires that you can take for natural history studies. And so what is there on Matrix? First of all, we have the ClinGen head to toe surveys. So this covers basically all of the bodily systems and asks questions about those so we can help identify, it's like, sure, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder, but there's always so much more to it. And so the ClinGen surveys help us understand if there are, for example, digestive system problems, or if there are skin issues that are commonly seen in your community, things like that. We have the Vineland, which many of you are probably familiar with. And then we have a whole bunch of other surveys here that try to address many domains that might be relevant, including behavior and sleep and quality of life. And we're always adding more as well. And so here's the ClinGen. As I said, it covers just about everything. And then you can also track individual things. What is it that's important to you as a particular individual patient or family that might not be captured on some of these other surveys? So for example, this particular example patient is recording things like bowel movements, falls when they're sleeping well, shaky on their feet and like losing balance, illness, nap in daytime. And then you can see here how you record it. And then when you look at the overview of the data, you can see that this individual had previously had multiple days of being really shaky on their feet and unsteady, and then falling pretty frequently, which I know for this particular patient had led to several injuries. But then all of a sudden, you can see based on this data that they stop falling so much and they start sleeping really well, and they are developing a whole bunch of new skills. And coincidentally, this is right around when that patient had started an experimental new treatment. So this is really great, like getting the data from things like the validated surveys is fantastic to researchers, but I also think for you as the parents, it's really great to be able to see these things that affect your individual day-to-day life. So that's something else that you can do on Matrix that's really cool. And our Matrix community is huge. This is showing the map for the Combined Brain umbrella matrix. So we have our other patient advocacy groups with their individual matrix portals. But here you can see that we are an international cohort with 27 countries being represented. I think it's more when we include some of the other individual PAG matrix accounts. And so, yeah, we are primarily US and Europe, but there are people from all over, which helps to ensure that we are getting an accurate view of how these disorders can affect people. We also are gathering data across the entire lifespan of individuals. We have infants who are enrolled in Matrix, and we also have older people enrolled in Matrix, although primarily it's a lot of people or patients who are like school age. But having all of this data or all of these patients across the entire lifespan is important to get the thorough picture of what the disease can look like. And here's an example of how data from these validated surveys can be useful. So here are a handful of disorders. These were some of the original members of Combined Brain. And this was based on a literature review of what symptoms were seen and what disorders, and then put into this chart to see which disorders were most similar to each other. So here you can see USP7, and then based on the symptoms that are seen, you can tell that it's clustering near SLC6A1, SYNGAP, GRIN2B, KDVS, So having all of this data enables us to understand what are the similar disorders that might make sense to partner with, whether for basic research or finding clinicians who are knowledgeable about treating you and your patient, or even going together on clinical trials. And then an example of some of the data that comes from Matrix. So these are graphs that are currently, these are in Matrix now. You as a patient, if you have completed the survey, are able to see this data. And so I'm just going to show some of the examples of the findings that you can see there. So for example, memory impairment, you can see that a little bit less than half of people are saying that they have this symptom. So I don't know which of these things will be a surprise to the community versus what are things that but that's kind of the fun of looking at the data, is like you get the surprises and you also get the validation of like, okay, right, that makes sense. This matches what I have seen. Another thing is hypotonia. It looks like the majority of your community has hypotonia, but there are also a good handful who do not. And so here we would want to understand what makes these people who have hypotonia different from those without. So we need more thorough data, like, whether it's the people who have the memory impairments, feeding difficulties, for example. This is often associated with hypotonia, but you can see that there are it's more or similar people who have a number of people have hypotonia as have feeding difficulties. And so being able to link those symptoms is useful for categorizing patients and determining the predicted outcomes that you might see. Seizures is another symptom that was reported so far in your Matrix data, although only 4 people were responding to this. So it's hard to say anything about how often seizures are in, how frequent those are in the community. And we can't really say who is going to have those seizures. Birthmarks apparently seem to be something that is somewhat common in the Hao-Fountain community. And so I think this is something that is relatively unique. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, there's always something that makes your disorder different from the 100 other disorders out there. So, here's one of those things that you can help to drive data on. So with all of those things, we need more thorough data in order to be able to draw conclusions as to the particular types of mutations. I know that there are different types of mutations associated with Hao-Fountain. And so once we need a larger amount of data in order to say if it's people who have mutations in this part of a protein versus that part of the protein, if they are more likely to have different symptoms. And in order to predict the age of onset of some of those symptoms, we need far more than the 10 or so responses that we have so far. And again, this is data that you can directly see in your own account. So you can always go check and see what cool new data is coming out. Additional uses for Matrix, it's not just for natural history. You can manage consent forms for research opportunities. So for example, if you've participated in the biorepository, we have your consent forms there. And so that means instead of needing to sign up for yet another platform, it's all right there in one place. Your genetic report, you can upload to Matrix. And so that means the next time you're participating in a study and they need the genetic report, you don't need to go digging around in your email or, pull out that hard drive from a closet and try to find the genetic report there to email to somebody. Instead, it'll be right there in Matrix. You can't lose it. It's easy to pull it up. You can log medications and therapies and other factors. So for example, you might be wondering if maybe started trying to implement an earlier bedtime. Is that helping behaviors? You can track that as one of the customizable things. Do stressful days cause more seizures? That's another thing that you can track. Another thing that Matrix can be used for is sharing information with clinicians. I know as rare disease families, there's a lot of complicated medical history, and that's probably annoying to share over and over saying the same thing. But there's a way to share that data directly from Matrix with your clinicians. And then you can even share selected information with the school or babysitters or other caregivers. For example, if you just want somebody to have a list of all the medications that your child is on, then there's a way to share that directly from Matrix. Additional reasons to sign up. I understand that there is a natural history study in Germany with Dr. Christian Schaff. For many of you, that is probably highly inconvenient or prohibitively difficult from going to see him, but instead you can just fill out surveys just from the comfort of your couch. And then that data will can be linked with the study that he's doing or other researchers like Irina. I've also mentioned the biorepository a couple times. Combined Brain had come to the last USP7 family conference and collected samples there. So those of you who have done that know that you have to sign up for Matrix in order to donate a sample. So it does take a couple minutes to complete your profile. And so if you're thinking about donating a sample in the future, then just go ahead, sign up for Matrix, get that out of the way so that it'll be less on your plate when you do go to donate a blood or urine sample. Repurposing trials, for example, so if the community is looking at identifying novel treatments from some of these drug companies like Charles River and Dana-Farber. And so in order to collect data on that, we're going to need individuals on Matrix, and we need a baseline understanding of what symptoms are currently present so that then after you start an experimental treatment, you can see how things have changed. If you don't have that baseline data for several months of solid data, then it's going to be hard to show that a treatment has had any effect. And then also for clinical trials, the foundation is only going to be able to enroll people that it knows about. Like if you are not enrolled in the registry or in the natural history, it's going to make it that much harder to be part of any future clinical trials. So with that, I think we have plenty of time left if we want people to sign up as users on Matrix. Here's the link. I can attempt to put some of these in the chat. And also, if you are an existing user, there's the URL for signing in and completing surveys. Let me just go back and try to put those in the chat here. Finding my Zoom controls while sharing screen. It's always a process. Okay, struggling here. All right, there's the new user request link, and here will be the link for existing users to sign in and complete some of the surveys. So are there any questions on anything, Combined Brain or natural history studies or Matrix?
I have a question. Hello.
Yeah.
Is with all the, as in the future when new companies come up and are doing similar things, is information shared with those companies, or is it proprietary?
No, it can absolutely be shared. Matrix loves sharing, and that is one of the reasons that we chose Matrix. Let me see if I can find the slide.
And then is there a cost to sharing that information at all with doctors and other companies?
Yeah, so the way it works is it's a profit sharing model. And so for industry, for companies, they have to buy the data from Matrix, and then a portion of that goes back to the USP7 Foundation. So it does not go to you as the parent, but it does go back to the foundation to enable future research opportunities. But then for academic researchers, it's typically free, but they still need to talk to the team at Matrix just to get approval. And so Matrix knows how many people are requesting data and where it's going and all that. Yeah, so it's a really great model that it can be somewhat self-sustaining for the foundation, that once you have enough data to attract interest from pharma companies, that then the money's coming back to the foundation to continue collecting more data and get more pharma companies interested.
Very cool. Thank you.
Any comments maybe that Becky or Bo or Amber that you want to pitch in here?
The only thing I was thinking, and maybe it's, it's a longer topic, but maybe like some of the things that might be coming up in the future that families might know that they could participate in if they're part of Matrix, that they'll get to, because I know there's some things that are coming up that they can probably, might want to do, but you have to be part of Matrix. It would be helpful to be part of Matrix.
Yeah. So I did not put this in the slides, but Combined Brain is launching an EEG bank. And so if you have ever had an EEG performed, then you will be able to upload the file from your doctor's office to Matrix, which then makes it available for researchers and pharma groups. Combined Brain actually is talking to, I think it's 7 industry groups right now on our EEG working group. And so that is pharmaceutical companies who are very much interested in getting EEGs from patients to find biomarkers. They'll be looking at the EEGs to see if there's anything unique to a given disorder, to see if that can be a biomarker for a treatment's success. So other groups have found biomarkers before. I think Angelman syndrome is one of the more famous ones. So there's like a specific pattern to the EEG from specifically individuals with Angelman syndrome, that then when they start taking treatments, the EEG patterns start looking more like a neurotypical individual. And what's really great about using EEG biomarkers is that they can be a lot faster than the actual like developmental outcomes. Like if you're using the Vineland, for example, to measure the developmental outcome, you probably have to wait at least 6 months to get any sort of measurable improvement there. But EEG markers can be much faster, perhaps within a couple weeks. And so you'll have that as a proxy to know that there will be future acquisition of skills or improvement of behavior or reduction of seizures, whatever it is that is big for Hao-Fountain. And so, yeah, having those EEGs uploaded to Matrix is going to be a wonderful project. We are always adding new surveys. I don't know that there's anything in the pipeline at the moment, but again, if there's something that's of particular interest to your community, then you can bring that to us at Combined Brain, and we will consider implementing it on Matrix for our whole community. Or you could always just specifically for USP7, you guys are in control and can add things just directly to yours as well. What else are we doing on Matrix? Yeah, the consent forms for the biorepository, and then also all the data that we need for the biorepository. Some of this might have already been mentioned before with other talks. I don't know if Anna Falzer has maybe spoken with the community, but one of the goals of the biorepository, a big one, is to develop biomarkers. And you need more than just the blood and the urine samples in order to create a biomarker. You need to understand what you are correlating, for example, the proteins that you might find in the blood. You need to be able to correlate that with the symptoms and the phenotypes. And so we have asked for the Vineland and for the Pell's seizure survey as necessary parts of the biorepository. so that people, so the researchers can look to see like, oh, maybe the individuals who have better scores on the Vineland are have whatever other feature in the blood or urine samples. And so that'll be a good biomarker for the success of clinical trials. But filling out more data is always helpful so that we can get a broader understanding. Let's see, is there anything I've forgotten? Amber or Bo, have I forgotten any of the big things that are coming up?
I don't think so. I think that covers it. Thank you, Sarah.
I think it's pretty good too. And I think an important point to stress is that Matrix is a solution for all the things coming up that we don't even know of yet. USP7 has so much underway in testing known FDA drugs and looking at some other drug libraries. So, like, we're always just hoping for a hit on something as simple as Paxil that's easy to get and the best way to monitor.
Yep, for sure. Yeah. And as I said, like we need thorough data. Like, you know, if one of these repurposing screens identifies a hit and you want to go start taking it tomorrow without having any baseline data, then you're not going to be able to show that it did anything. And so then what Bo would be asking all of you to do would be to hold off on taking that until you have the data to show what you're starting from. And I think that would be incredibly frustrating to everybody involved. So start filling out the surveys now, get that baseline data so that we can understand what symptoms are present and the severity of those, so that then all of those drug screens that your community is doing, once you find a hit, like once it's approved to go, then everybody can start taking it immediately.
The USP7 phenotype is so wide and broad that it's going to be much easier to be your own benchmark for really mild patients. Maybe something small will help. For severe patients, we're not going to see that same efficacy, but you know, it makes sense. And they may require something stronger. And I really think that's the case here.
Yeah, you can't rely on other people filling out those surveys for you. Like you need to put in the data on your own patient, in part due to you all have different mutations, you have different phenotypes, your kids are of different ages, they've had different medications they've been exposed to in the past. Everybody is unique. And so we need data on all of them to understand exactly like what to expect from treatments. Mandan.
When connecting to like let's say the initial sign up and the initial survey information, and we do link up, I'm just going to say Epic. That's one of the company, or that's one of the big software companies for the medical information where I'm at anyway. Will it give you the information in a working timeline format, or is it going to be like all the information at one point? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you're able to, I think some of it is, it should, if your chart shows that a medication was started in 2020 and ceased in 2022, then when that data is imported into Matrix, it should show that, you know, that medication is no longer being used, but you are on this whatever other medication that was started maybe last year or something. Is that kind of what you were asking?
Yeah, because I imagine like the initial survey information is probably the least accurate because it's just based on people's memory of the history of what's been done. For us anyway, there's been so much stuff that it's hard to know when it was done, at what age, what milestones, and like I'm having a hard time remembering and like what stuff we've already done. I had to text my wife, did we already do this survey? Did we, you know, it's hard to keep track of that. So I encourage Bo and Becky that maybe we could do a like a 10 top things of information that we need everybody to do, and little check marks if you've done it or not, like a scorecard, because it's hard to track everything. But back to this is so the working history, once after you do the initial survey, how often is is are you supposed to do it anyway? Just like annually, or will it then keep track? If you link it to Epic software, will it automatically update, or do you have to go in and input it manually?
Yeah, so it depends survey to survey. So many of the caregiver entered questionnaires are set to repeat every year. If you wanted to do it every 6 months, that would be great. And I think some of them might be set that way. But then for the data from your electronic health record, once you give approval to pull it in from a specific hospital or care center or whatever, it'll look every week and then just automatically pull data in every week. And one thing to note is that you do have control of that. So if for whatever reason you're like, okay, I want the data from this doctor, but I don't want to pull it in from this doctor, or, like I only want to pull in like the surgical procedures or something, but I don't want to show the medication history for whatever reason, then you can pick and choose what data gets pulled in that initial time, and then when it every week refreshes, it'll just pull in like the specific things that you have selected. Yeah, does that answer your questions there?
Yeah, very much. Thank you.
Although, and many of the surveys on Matrix, like the questionnaires, like the aberrant behavior checklist, or the children's sleep habit questionnaire, those ones I don't think are going to be in your EHR. Even if your provider maybe did have you take those, they're probably not going to be incorporated in the EHR to be uploaded. And so those things you would still have to take separately in Matrix and like do that like every year or something. The one that we are able to pull in from other sources is the Vineland. And so if you have taken the Vineland elsewhere, if you have a PDF of it, that you can upload that. I don't know if USP7 works with Simon's Searchlight. No, okay. That's some of our other groups work with them, and so we're able to share Vinelands between them so that people don't need to take that more often than necessary. Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, but this has been so great. I'm so glad that you gave this presentation to our group, and hopefully it encourages everybody to go ahead and sign up for Matrix.
Yeah, hopefully. It really is, like, for you as the parents, one of the most helpful ways that you can participate and like help out the community. It is something that only you can do. This data is necessary. Like, researchers would love to get their hands on it. Industry is paying a lot of money to have access to the data that exists so far. So really, there's a huge demand for it.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for doing this for us. We really appreciate it. And it's, like I said, it was a great presentation. We appreciate it very, very much.
Yep, happy to help.
Thanks, Sarah.
All right, bye.
Thank you.
Bye.